Blue, this is Ron. I'm headed that way, but I am on the phone.
Thanks, Ron. We're
Did
ready?
Tim join yet? Or is it just? Okay. We have
We have two. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order then at 4 p.m. This is a special meeting for Tuesday, July 15th, 2024 to discuss Port McKenzie. Madam Clerk.
Tim Hale, are you on the phone? Stephanie Nowers, are you on the phone?
Here.
I'm expecting Dee McKee, Maxwell Sumner,
Present.
Bill Gamble,
Here.
Dimitri Fonoff,
Here.
Ron Bernier, are you on the phone?
Present.
You do have a quorum, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, the agenda is approved. If you all stand, please, and Dave, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't probably have a sign-up sheet, I guess, okay. So it's now audience participation. Anyone that's in the audience that would like to address the assembly has 3 minutes. Anybody would like to say something to the assembly?
And if I can get you to turn the button on when you reach there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Members, I just wanted to thank the staff. My son, who is leaving for graduate school this summer, separating from the military, we had the opportunity to tour Port McKenzie. And for him, from a graduate business student, it was an incredible experience. And for myself, it just reaffirmed that I am 100% supportive of this project and was thrilled to hear that the grant went through. So thank you for that opportunity.
Michelle, if we can have you say your name for the
Sorry, I
record, please.
forgot. Michelle Heun, Heun. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Do we have anybody online, sir? We do not. Okay. Seeing no one else, then I'll close audience participation. The first item on our agenda is Port McKenzie discussion, and I'll turn the meeting over. Do you want to introduce Dave, or I just turn it over to Dave? What's your preference, sir?
I think we can go straight to Dave.
Okay, I'll turn it over to the port director then.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor, Manager Brown, Assembly members. My name is David Griffin. I'm the Port Director at Port McKenzie. And just want to say thanks off the bat for taking the time to come hear the update today. I think for me, it's important to get out in front of you guys and just explain a little bit about what's going on at Port McKenzie. There's a lot of moving parts. In particular, today I want to speak to business development and some of the projects that we have going on, and just kind of run through some of the nuts and bolts of the port from the perspective of port operations taking place down on the dock to port operations taking place up in the uplands, also known as the Port District, and then just development and business development taking place in the Point McKenzie region and how all of this fits together. The video that we're watching right now is just some images of the port in action. It really is in a strategic location for the future growth of our state here in South Central. And, from what I can gather, the history is pretty unique about Port McKenzie. The Port Commission was established in 1988, and then the port itself started construction in 1999. We ended up with a 7-acre pad with a barge dock, a 500-foot long barge dock. Our first business there was the manufacturing and transport of modular housing to villages in western Alaska. And then in 2004, construction for the deep draft dock began, and then we were exporting wood chips. And so there was a wood chip operation there for several years. So the conveyor system that you see on site is it's a legacy infrastructure from the wood chip operation. Today we are primarily servicing and providing service for barge operations. And we usually get in one ship. Last year we had in 2 ships, but the future's bright, and we are growing, and we see a lot of opportunity in the future. And there's a lot of business, a lot of companies that are looking at Port McKenzie for setting up operations for a variety of different things. And so those are some of the things I want to talk to you guys about today. So we'll get into got about 15 or 16 slides in this presentation. We titled it Navigating Priorities, Progress, and Projects at Port McKenzie. Feel free if you have any questions at all to ask. I want this to be somewhat of an open discussion with dialogue, and I'd be happy to take a pause and answer any questions you guys might have. And just real quick, kind of give an overview. Port McKenzie is only a couple miles from Anchorage. So in this photo here, we're looking south. That's Anchorage in the background. One of the nice things that we have going on as a port is the fact that we have another port 2 miles away. What that means for us is there are maritime industry right in our neck of the woods. So when I talk about maritime industry, Anchorage is bringing in 4 ships a week with Tote and Matson. Those are oftentimes the container ships that are bringing us groceries for Fred Meyer's, Costco, Walmart, all of our lumber and hardware for Lowe's and Home Depot and places like that, Best Buy. They also bring in fuel, and they bring in cement, and there's a little bit of activity with the military, and they get a little bit of cruise ship activity. But by and large, Anchorage is, when you think of Anchorage as a port, containerized freight and fuel. There's a lot of fuel being used in Anchorage, especially at the airport. They're using about 2.5 million gallons of fuel a day, over 900 million gallons of fuel a year. There's pipelines running from their port all the way out to the airport. And then when you think about the containerized freight, 75% of that freight is staying in Anchorage or going to points south. Only 25 to 35% of that freight is going out to the valley and points north up to Fairbanks. So I just want to be really clear, like when we talk about developing business at Port McKenzie, we're not looking at replicating what Anchorage is doing. For one, it just doesn't make sense to try to take containerized big box store freight on our side and then ship it back around by truck or train to Anchorage. So what we're looking at with Port McKenzie, it's Alaska's industrial port. It's a place where you can import and export bulk commodities. And when I talk about bulk commodities, I'm talking about coal, timber, sand, gravel, salt, cement, any sort of minerals or ore. We want to make our port that port that's moving those types of commodities to market. We're located right where Upper Cook Inlet meets the Kinnick Arm. In many ways, Port McKenzie's on a river. The river actually goes up and down about 30 feet. We have crazy tidal fluctuations, the second largest in North America. And then we have outgoing and incoming tides. So we get a current out in front of the dock that goes both directions. So our water goes in and out and up and down. It's also cold, it's full of sediment, so it is challenging water. However, with that said, we are so far inland that we don't experience the sort of wave action that you might find in the lower inlet. In many ways, our water's calm and protected. It just moves back and forth and up and down. So the Port District. The Port District is a zoned special use district. It's zoned for industrial and commercial uses. Within the boundaries of the Port District, we're looking at about 9,000 acres of land. Now, that also includes the tide and submerged lands, which is one of the unique things about our port. We actually own about 2 miles of shoreline out to the middle of the channel. It's very unique. Those lands, those tide submerged lands, are owned by the borough. We don't have to go to the state and get any sort of tide land lease or anything like that. So in terms of like future growth and development, we can go north and south of our existing dock for any sort of expansion. And for the uplands, there's close to about 5,000 acres of developable land. You'll see in the image there's some scattered ponds and there's a lake and there's some wetlands. But commingled through that area is developable land, including gravel resources, the Port McKenzie rail extension, rail loop is in there. That's that sort of oval bare spot on the map, and you can actually see the rail embankment running through the port district. There's also paved access down to the water. There's also three-phase power running out here. The blue lines in this map, those are electrical transmission lines. Those are Chugach electrical transmission lines. We actually have a substation. So there's actually energy moving through this transmission line that goes all the way up to Fairbanks, Gold Valley Electric, all the way across down to Anchorage. So this area has been on the radar of different energy companies that are looking to develop either alternative energy or some sort of sustainable energy so that they can tap into that grid. You'll also see a little snapshot in the top left corner. That's the Point McKenzie Farms. There's 13,000 acres of agricultural land in the Point McKenzie region. The Port McKenzie Rail Extension runs through those farms. And I don't have the land status map up here, but there's also a mixture of other borough lands outside the Port District boundaries, Trust Land Office lands, and then native lands, as well as University of Alaska. So our priorities over the last 2.5 to 3 years since I've been in this role has been business development, improvements to our infrastructure, and trying to figure out creative ways for public-private partnerships. Today, I'm primarily focused on business development. And one of the things with business development is demonstrating that our facility is capable and we are doing the things that we need to do to attract business. And part of that has been just outreach, networking, getting out to the different trade industry groups like the Resource Development Council, the Alliance, the Alaska Miners Association, and just reminding them that, like, hey, we're over here and we're open for business and this is what we can offer you. We also are part of the Alaska Association of Harbor Masters and Port Administrators, and we also have a seat on the Cook Inlet Harbor Safety Committee. We work with a variety of different government agencies, both local, state, and federal. Some examples with the local government, obviously we are part of the local government, but we, from a business development perspective, we maintain relationships with the Greater Wasilla Chamber of Commerce in the city of Wasilla. We also work with our friends at the university and Department of Natural Resources and state DOT. And then the federal agencies involved, as you can imagine, the Coast Guard, Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, things like that. And then we've been doing quite a bit of marketing. And one of the things that's provided in the folder, I think you all received a blue folder, is a draft of a business profile that will be in the August issue of Alaska Business Magazine, which will highlight Port McKenzie. It's a 2-page spread. And additionally, we also maintain close relationships with the Kanick-Otnu tribe and Cook Inlet Regional Inc., SERI, who happens to have started using Port McKenzie as of last year for Fire Island wind turbine maintenance and repair operations. So one of the things that Manager Brown and I have built into our sort of business development philosophy is base hits. And a base hit is working with some of these regional groups, just like I just mentioned, Fire Island Wind. The Fire Island Wind project, it's got millions of dollars of infrastructure on Fire Island. It wasn't until last year that they recognized that Port McKenzie is a way more affordable and easier option for moving their wind turbine parts and pieces over to the island. Historically, they were bringing everything up on a flatbed trailer from the lower 48, driving all the way down to Homer, putting it on a barge, and barging it back up to Fire Island. Mm-hmm. They came out last year, took a tour of the port, said, holy smokes, we can do barging out of here. Mm-hmm. and saving money and time, not to mention space. It's one of the major problems that most ports have is they don't have enough space. We have plenty of space. We have plenty of areas for folks to stage and store materials and equipment until they're ready to move it by water. So when we look at sort of the three tiers of business development, the dock, the port district, the Point McKenzie region as a whole, our base hits are going to be bringing in new terminal operators like Fire Island, working with companies like Western Construction that are replacing culverts out in Tyonek, Cruise Construction's doing projects out in Western Alaska, Jim Baxter with Northern Gravel and Trucking moving salt to different locations all the way from Kodiak down to Juneau, Sitka, and Ketchikan. And then we also moved modular houses last year for the Metarvik village move. I don't know if you guys read about that in the paper, but they're moving a village in Western Alaska, and those temporary homes came out of Port Mac. They were built in Wasilla. So for us, those are base hits. When we talk about home runs, those are like the big darn deals, right? Like completion of the Port McKenzie rail extension, completion of the West Susitna access road, possible AKLNG, or some sort of subsidiary company that wants to produce, store, and transport fuel. And then there's sort of the doubles and the triples. Those would be like fuel tank farm, which we have some interest going on right now to bring fuel into the port. Could also mean developing our gravel resources and start mining material for projects. Sort of more of a long-term lease type structure that would be taking place in the port district. And then so as I had mentioned, like we've got one lease up top right now. That's for a fuel tank farm. They haven't developed it yet, but I heard that they've recently acquired some financing. So I have a feeling that something's going to be on the horizon on that end. And that's another reason I wanted to get in front of the assembly today, is just to let you guys know there's going to be some things coming down the line over the next year. And I just want to make sure that we had time to sort of get you primed and have time for asking some questions for what some of this might look like. And we did see an uptick in our terminal operators last year. One I've mentioned was Siri, Fire Island Wind. And then we recently received a new application for a lease associated with the Nova Mineral Project. They're looking at developing a processing facility of some form or another in the Port District. We also do a lot of tours and provide opportunities for folks to come out, walk the facility, because seeing is believing. If you haven't been out to the port, I highly recommend getting out there. It's amazing, and it really kind of drives home like the size, the scale, and the scope of what's possible, especially with all the land that we have. And then another group that's been very interested in the port over the last couple of years has been the military. Now, they're looking at the port from a number of different angles, one of which is just day-to-day use, import-export of containers and equipment, but they're also looking at longevity, resiliency for military planning. And that's a big concept that the military is looking at, is like, how can we expand our resiliency in Alaska? And Port McKenzie could play a role in that. There will be the Arctic Edge training exercise taking place. This is going to be the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard will be utilizing the port for about 2.5 weeks later this month and into the first half of August. The exercise pertains to more of an emergency response activity, as if the port in Anchorage is compromised and they have to lighter cargo from the Anchorage side over to the port side. So that'll be very interesting. I highly recommend coming out for a visit during that operation if it fits in your schedule. It starts up July 27th and goes through August 15th, more or less. There's still a few dates that are kind of moving, but that's roughly the time frame. And then, as I mentioned, the Lorraine Pit. The Lorraine Pit's going to open us up to developing a site that's been identified as having a material resource that meets DOT, state DOT Type A standards. And then we'll also be needing material for our barge ramp project, which would come out of that pit. Back to sort of the three tiers, you know, in base hits, we've got the barging on the water, the what we're calling the surf and turf. It's a mixture of the water and the land, where we're talking about fuel storage, the cement, the long-term leases for potential mineral processing, and then sort of the home runs, the manufacturing of different commodities and potential storage and transportation of fuel. So everything you see in this picture right here is within the Port District. So the water, the mud, the uplands, everything in there is in the Port District. It's part of that. The dock, the deep draft dock out there is about 1,200 feet long. The cargo platform is 100 by 100 feet. The trestle or the pier leading out to the deep draft dock is about 475 feet long. The barge dock is 500 feet. And then the gravel pad is about 15 acres. And this is what it looks like out there today. So some of the projects. Last year we completed the cathodic protection. We put sacrificial anodes on all of our steel in the water. It's going to buy us about 10 years of protection on all of our metal in the water. We got the first phase of the pile sleeves done. The pile sleeve project was a really heavy lift. It was supported through a grant from the Economic Development Administration. It was a $10.5 million construction project that finished ahead of schedule by 3 weeks and on budget. It was a big success, but we still got 32 more piles to wrap. So the first phase of that's done. The rough terrain cargo crane was purchased through a grant from the U.S. Marine Highway Program. That crane has been purchased, is on order. It's just waiting to be delivered. And then we had the barge dock inspected, and we did an assessment on that to tell us what sort of condition it's in and how much more useful life. It had a 30-year design life. It was constructed in 2000, so it's on our radar in terms of either a replacement or some sort of renovation. And then we also we're excited to announce that we received a grant award through U.S. Department of Transportation for approximately $7.8 million to build the barge haul out facility. So it's pretty exciting news. We're very jazzed about that.
Hey, that deserves a hand.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, that's powerful.
I did, Mayor, get a call from Senator Murkowski's office today congratulating us.
Oh, good.
So, you know, and then the Point McKenzie region, what's going on? There are all sorts of things happening out in the Point McKenzie region. We've got lots of land. There's no federal land, thank goodness. It's all state, borough, native, and private. And so as we look forward to the future with the West Susitna access and opportunities that that's going to provide, not only the borough, but the state and the nation for that matter, when we start looking at the critical minerals that are out there, it's going to be a big boon for Alaska. In many ways, I feel like the West Susitna is the future of Alaska. Mm-hmm. It just has so much opportunity.
Right, yeah.
And then the Port McKenzie rail extension plays into this as well. So if we start looking at developing a mineral processing facility in the Port District, that's going to open up opportunities to bring minerals like antimony, copper, gold, coal from interior regions down to Port McKenzie. Mm-hmm. I mentioned the electrical transmission lines. There's all sorts of upgrades in the works for not only electrical transmission lines, but also communication lines. We've got natural gas in the region. Just 15 miles north of the port is the Beluga natural gas transmission line. It's a 20-inch line. When we hear in the news to talk about building the AK LNG project, the AK LNG project second phase connects to the Beluga line down in Beluga. So that second phase, the first phase meaning they're going to build a processing facility, second phase, the pipe down to Beluga, that's going to put gas right into that line, which is going to run right by us, 15 miles north of the port.
Good.
Which might open up opportunities for having or expanding. There already is LNG in the area, but expanding that LNG. We've got agriculture. Then there's also, there's always the bridge, right? And or tunnel. So that's something to keep on the radar as well. And then there's also a lot of private land. One of the things that's unique about Alaska is that we don't have very much privately owned property. Less than 1% of Alaska is in private ownership. This region, this area has a lot of private land. We're going to continue to see growth in this direction. So pretty much what I like to call the sort of the triangle development goes from Wasilla, Point McKenzie, north up into the upper Susitna. That area is going to continue to grow just as a result of the fact that there's private property at scale. In fact, on that point in this map here, kind of lays out a lot of what I was just talking about. So the Port District is the pink shaded red boundary area there in the middle of the map. You can see the yellow is paved roads. You can see electrical transmission lines. You can see the gas lines. You can see the West Susitna Access Road. You can see the Port McKenzie Rail Extension, the Parks Highway. Obviously the water bodies. Like, there is so much going on in this one area, this one region, and it's just going to continue to grow. And the port, in many ways, is a cornerstone of this growth. This map's also in your blue folder. Now, this map here is a map that was generated by Ada that's specific to the West Susitna Access Road. And for those of you that don't know, there's a 100-mile long road planned. It leads from West Susitna Parkway up into the mountains to these mineral claims. The first 22 miles, which includes a bridge over the Susitna River and a bridge over Alexander Creek, that portion of the alignment has been taken over by state DOT. And then the remaining portion, which is the red alignment, is ADA's, Alaska Import-Export Development Authority. You can see the mining claims in there. Everything in blue is state. There's a lot of state land. Everything in orange is private. And then you can see a little bit of the native land, and then the borough land is purple. So West Susitna Access Road, at least the first portion that DOT is working on, 12 miles of that goes through borough land, the Fish Creek Management Area, as it gets out to the Susitna River. That is a prime opportunity for all sorts of development. There's good soils there for agriculture. There's good timber there for timber resources. So there's a lot of movement in this area. I just really want to hammer that point home. So looking ahead, as I mentioned, we have the Arctic Edge military training exercise that's going to be happening later this month. We have an old master plan for the port that was really more focused on LNG. So we're in the process of revising that plan and just updating it. We've got more data now, more information, better maps. And one of the things that we're also going to be working on for the port is updating our port security. We're going to electrify the upper gate. Right now, it's just like a farm gate almost. And so we got to tackle that project. We're going to be the barge haul out ramp that we won the grant for has already been designed, engineered. We're in the very last steps of permitting. And so that project is ready to go. So as soon as we figure out the grant award and those negotiations, we are going to get moving on that. It'd be great if we can get that worked out and have the bid packet out this fall and construction starting next summer of 26. One of the things that we've heard from some of our shippers is the A-frame, which is the portion of the conveyor that's out on the end of the deep draft dock, is in the way. So we're going to explore maybe taking that down, keeping it in case we need to use it again, but maybe removing it up until the point we need to use it. It would speed up some of the operations of the shippers and just be less of an annoyance having it. I mentioned the barge dock renovation. We're going to be taking a closer look at that. And then some funding strategies, like what are some ways that we can get some of these larger projects completed? And then obviously grants. Grants are a big part of public infrastructure, especially on the water. So we're going to continue to pursue port infrastructure development grants. We are submitting a grant application today to the U.S. Marine Highway Program for a loader, a forklift, and a skid steer. So we have some equipment for maintenance and operations out on the dock. And then we are also going to look at working with the Economic Development Administration on funding to complete the Powsley project. And with that, I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Any assembly have questions? And just before I acknowledge you, I'll let the record show that Assemblyperson McKee arrived at 4:09 and Deputy Mayor arrived at 4:29. Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Yeah, up at the top, as you go up the hill, there's like I think it's 14 acres of like flat land. You may have already mentioned that, but what's the plan for that? Is that the agricultural thing?
Through the mayor,
Go ahead.
Ms. McKee, this is what we refer to as the port uplands or the port district. These are borough-owned lands that have been zoned industrial commercial to support the port and port operations and business development. The agricultural lands are about 7 miles north of the port district.
I have a great idea I got to tell you about sometime about that 14 acres up there. It's going to be great. I just think they ought to turn it into like an Alaskan Native village where people don't have to fly out of here to go to Barrow. They can just go to Barrow by going across the inlet to guess where? Port McKenzie. I just thought if it was a real deal, it might be something. Think about it.
Any other comments or questions? Assemblyperson Fauna, go ahead.
The grant you gave us update, is that specifically for the barge or for that the ramp, right? Is that correct? I think slide 12 kind of would indicate that. Is that what number one is? That can you talk a little more on is there any match local? What is going to be that from what you know so far?
Mr. Fauna, through the mayor. Yes, the grant that we recently were awarded is specific to developing what we call the barge ramp or barge haul out facility. And that's that conceptual design that you're seeing there at the north part of the dock. It measures approximately 300 feet long, 200 feet wide. It is all rock. There's no metal or steel involved in this project. It's basically big rock. It filled in. It will have a gravel surface and a 7% grade.
And for one, I guess, what amount of grant we have and what is approximate? I know the prices change. The cost wise, is that anticipated to be enough? Is there a local match? And then if once this is completed, what kind of additional new businesses or opportunities that would bring as a clientele?
Good question through the mayor. So the grant formula requires a 35% match. Those funds have already been secured. So the project is fully funded. At this stage, based on the funding that we have and the grant award, we have plenty of funds for this project. In fact, that's one of the things we're going to have to negotiate once we start working with the grant funding agency is, and we'll know more once we go out to bid and see where the numbers come back. But our estimates right now is that the project is, based on its current design and everything, is probably somewhere from the $6 to $8 million mark in terms of cost. But that could change between now and the time we go to construction, based on fuel costs and whatever the cost of the materials are. We're hoping that the costs will remain low because a portion of the material that we'll be using will come from within the port district, some of the material, the more the fines and the crushed rock. And then in terms of business activity, the purpose of this ramp was designed to haul barges up out of the water. One of the things that we've heard from the barge operators is that come wintertime, they have to pull their barges up out of the water. There aren't enough places to store their barges. So if they're out in Western Alaska, sometimes instead of bringing them in and storing them in South Central where their base of operations are at, they may leave them out in these Western villages. They may have to pull them up out of a river and just store them on the uplands, or bring them back and hope that they can find space in Homer, which is rare. And if they don't, then they have to go to Seward and hope that they can find space there. It's very expensive to store barges. And then typically barges that are being used commercially have to go through a Coast Guard inspection. So they have to get pulled up out of the water so that the Coast Guard can come and inspect them. We're hoping to capture that type of business here at Port McKenzie.
Yeah, that's great because I think we got definitely plenty of land there. And I think potentially with that potential for a repair shop or, that kind of a service company to be able to do that, I could see that being a very, all year round type of a business that could benefit as well.
Yeah, recently filling up gas at the gas station, filling up the truck, I was approached by a young man that is a commercial fisherman and fishes in Bristol Bay. He lives in Settlers Bay and was asking if he could bring his boat to Port McKenzie and whether or not we had the ways to or means to pull it up out of the water so he could store it here so he could actually work on it and fill around with his boat during the off season. Right now he's in a similar situation where he has to go find a slip. It's typically somewhere like Homer, maybe even Kodiak. And then it's just expensive driving back and forth and the costs. And we've heard that also from one of our terminal operators out at the port where they don't know from year to year where they're going to find space to store their barges. And it's usually Homer or Seward, but they're based in Palmer. So they're having to pay for their staff to drive down, and basically live out of their truck or a motel to work on their barges. So we're hoping that this barge ramp, well, not hoping, it will happen. They'll use this to pull their barges up out of the water. But furthermore, it's also going to open up opportunities for landing craft and other barge activities. So barges could come in at high tide, go dry when the tide goes out, load or unload, and then refloat at high tide and move back out. We also have, if you look kind of where the number 5 is at the south end of the barge dock, right below the 5 is what we call our bow ramp berth. So barges will come in, drop the bow ramp. They got about 3 hours at high tide for roll on, roll off of cargo. If the water's ever rough on the south side and they have to wait, this would allow them to come around to the north side because the water will be calmer and then they can load or unload on the north side. So it also just provides a little bit of redundancy at the dock, just specific to bow ramp barge operations.
Assemblyperson Nowers, did you have a comment or question, ma'am?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dave, for a great presentation, and thank you for being such an advocate for the port. I know one question I had for you, I've got two, but one was the item on the agenda tonight that would move management of the port district to the port fund and also allow for land selection. I just wondered, could you talk about that a little bit, and particularly that land selection, because I wasn't really sure if that was something, land selection in the port district or land outside it. But if you could just talk about what that means for the port and particularly what that meant by land selection.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Ms. Nowers, through the mayor. So there will be some legislation at our 6 o'clock meeting tonight specific to moving management underneath the port. It's sort of like that already. This legislation just codifies the sort of the management intent of the port to be managed solely as port. We currently co-manage the uplands with community development, land and resources. Joe Metzger, the Land and Resources Division Manager, and I work closely together. We attend a lot of meetings together specific to business development. So the idea is that by codifying this, revenue that's generated within the port district stays within the Port District. There is a enterprise fund set up for the port, so any sort of revenue that's generated will stay within the port in that enterprise fund. Historically, some of that was going into the land management fund. So this was an effort to sort of clean up code, I guess, so to speak. We're still intending to co-manage it and work together. We're going to use Title 23 policy and procedures for managing land. So it'll be very similar. It's not like we're looking at a completely different management schematic outside of what the borough is already doing. But what it does, it sort of streamlines some of the decision making for the port and the Port District. And quite frankly, we already kind of manage the Port Commission meetings. We're out there daily. We spend a lot of time in the Port District and work with business owners that are using the port that also want to do things in the Port District. So in many ways, it just makes that management more efficient. In terms of the land selection, I think that was just language that was sort of synonymous with other borough language when it comes to land management. I think that's why it's in there. I would say that one of the things that might help us do is allow us to negotiate with, say, like the University of Alaska, which owns some in-holdings inside the Port District, to possibly work towards a cooperative management agreement for land management and or negotiate a land swap or some sort of potential acquisition of those lands at some point in the future. We haven't had those negotiations with the university yet, but the university does own about 4 parcels totaling about 850 acres within the Port District. They have not been developed and for all intents and purposes are off grid. However, they are within the Port District. So there is some thought on trying to acquire those to sort of make the Port District whole, just so we don't end up in a situation where there's some sort of conflict in land use within the district.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask one more question, Mayor?
I'm sorry, Mike.
Oh, she asked if she can ask another question.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for that answer. So just what I'm hearing is it gives you the ability to kind of manage the port holistically. So I appreciate that. You mentioned some of the maintenance that's going to be needed out at the port. Do you have a sense what are the biggest ticket items? You know, maybe the big 3 over the next 5 to 7 years or whatever time frame. What are the big ticket items that you see that need to be done maintenance wise out there, and ballpark, you know, what that might look like over the next few years for the borough?
Great question.
Go ahead, sir.
Through the mayor. So moving forward, sort of big ticket items, I would have to say, well, the barge ramp was one.
Right.
And I think we've kind of checked that. So moving away from the barge ramp, sort of big ticket items would be the A-frame out on the dock. That's probably a $500,000 project to dismantle that. I think it would be cheaper if we were to just go in and salvage it. But if we were to demo it so that we could potentially use it later, there's a high ticket cost on that, high price on that. Finishing up the pile sleeves, we don't want to wait too long on that because we want to make sure that we're still within the window of time when we installed the first round of sleeves. So, and then the last thing would be the barge dock. And specifically, there's 15 cells in the barge dock, but cell 1 has always given us some problems ever since it was installed. And from day one, we probably should have ripped the sheet pile out and just put in new sheet pile, but for whatever reason we didn't at that time. And so cell 1 is definitely on the front burner, something we're taking a close look at. We've had to do a couple of emergency repairs to that sheet pile over the last couple of years. The price tag on that Cell 1, because it's sort of an anchor cell at the very end, it's also adjacent to our bow ramp berth. We'd probably be looking at about a $3 million price tag on that project, maybe 4, depending on how it's done. And really, those are kind of the big ones, I would say. The A-frame, which isn't really a front burner project, but it's something that's on our radar. I would say the pile sleeves in Cell 1. And the pile sleeves, we've already got the design, engineering, and permitting done. So really, that's materials and labor. That's probably a $7 million price tag. So between now and the next 5 years, those are the 2 projects that are going to be of primary focus for us, is pile sleeves and Cell 1.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, Dave, could you refresh my memory? Wasn't your background before coming to work for the borough in land management? Right. So taking over this 9,000 acres is right in your wheelhouse, anyways. It's your area of expertise, so it just fits with you really well.
Go ahead, sir.
Through the mayor. Mr. Gamble, yes, when I initially came to the borough to work, I got hired as Land and Resources Division Manager because I have a background in land management. I was with the State Department of Natural Resources for about 18 years. 6 of those years was in mining, land, and water, including about 4.5 years managing the Connecticut River Public Use Area. Helped write the management plan, first set of regulations for that. So called myself a land janitor back then because I felt like most of my time was spent cleaning up after pallet fires and burnt up cars, you name it. But we did a lot of trail work. We did easements. We did permitting, commercial recreational permitting out there. Then I worked in the Division of Parks and Outdoor Recreation as a project coordinator out of the director's office. My main project was the South Denali Visitor Center, which ended up turning into the Kasugi Cane Campground, which also included running new electrical grid from basically Sunshine up to Trapper Creek, which at that point was single phase. We upgraded that to 3-phase and then ran new grid from like mile 117 up to 132. Did land negotiations, land acquisition, leases, permits, easements, all those sorts of fun things. And then I went over and did land development, for the Trust Land Office in Southeast Alaska primarily. So subdivision development, roads, utilities, all those sorts of things. Worked on one of the largest land exchanges in state history with the U.S. Forest Service and the Trust Land Office, 20,000 acres for 20,000 acres. Done mining, timber, kind of the whole mixed bag of different things. So I'm learning port stuff, which has been a lot of fun. I'm very grateful to have this opportunity because, quite honestly, if you were to ask me a few years ago if I'd ever be running a port, I would have told you you're crazy. But Mike Brown, Manager Brown, had faith in me, and it's been a lot of fun. I think we're having a good time and we're doing good things. And I think having my background with land negotiations and land use is definitely beneficial to this port project as a whole. So.
Assemblyperson Fanon, go ahead.
Dave, generally on the ports that are smaller in size or similar, I should say, when there's enough activity, are they historically, not this one but the other ones, are they sustain themselves, or they need to be subsidized, or they're profitable? Do you ever looked at or maybe what would this port need to do, how much activity in order to start becoming profitable? Just rough ideas for what you know.
Good question through the mayor. I don't have a real good answer on that. I think there's a saying in the port world: once you've seen one port, you've seen one port, because they're all just different. I think what's going to be a key to our long-term success is completion of the rail extension, quite frankly. I think that's going to open up and unlock all sorts of opportunities. What we're trying to do, we're trying to run on a shoestring budget keep our operation costs low, really get out there and generate as much what I like to call weather around the port. Just generate some buzz, generate some weather, get people out there, help them understand the potential. Try not to put up barriers, actually try to take some barriers down, because we are government. And I think there's oftentimes when it comes to business, there's concern that government gets in the way, right? I think we could all agree to some extent that, you know, smaller government's better government for the free market. And so, we're just trying to not be our own worst enemy, so to speak, of getting in the way. Now, obviously, we got code to follow. There's rules and there's regulations. And so trying to balance business development and incentivizing use of the port, and trying to be, I mean, oftentimes with business, it just comes down to communicating, right? Just being open to communicating with folks, answering questions, making ourselves available. One of the great things that I have going for me is this exceptional team of Greg and Kareem, because they're allowing me to have a little bit more breadth and bandwidth to go and meet with folks, sell the port, if you want to call it that, and explore business opportunities. And so there's a lot of negotiating, a lot of meetings, a lot of hand holding, a lot of making ourselves available. And we get tire kickers. I mean, it's frustrating at times. You might spend a day or 2 or 3 or months talking to folks about projects and nothing ever happens, you know. But, you know, do you just give up on them, or do you keep working with them and trying to figure some of that out? And Manager Brown and I were just talking about that. It's like, you know, we are getting busier and trying to prioritize our time and who we are able to meet with and choose to meet with. But just today alone, I mean, I had talked to Murkowski's office. I had a meeting with Randy Ruaro, director of ADA. Had a meeting with Crowley of Fuels. I had a meeting with Quality Asphalt and Paving. And I probably got 20 emails. Like, there's a lot of different things going on. And just making ourselves available and communicating, I think, is really what's been a big difference with the port lately. And then the other thing, and Assemblymember Bernier was talking to us about, like, what are we doing? Who are we meeting with in the trade industry? Who are we marketing to? And we're having to put ourselves out there, quite frankly. We're having to go to into Anchorage and go to these breakfasts and luncheons and hand out our cards and talk to people and make ourselves available and give presentations and really sell the port, because we have a lot of political headwinds on the Anchorage side. There is some entrenched attitudes about Port McKenzie that include misinformation and just flat out unfactual information that we have to go in there and sort of correct the record on a daily basis. So there's a lot of sort of behind the scenes things that we do, at least I do in particular, to sort of correct the record with some of these folks. And it goes all the way to, it goes all the way to the port in Anchorage, quite frankly, and information that they're saying about our port. Stuff like we have to dredge. We don't have to dredge. Our port's situated where it's at because it's naturally scoured. That's why it's at where it's at. We maintain 60 feet of depth at low tide out in front of our deep draft dock. We don't have to dredge. We heard some misinformation about, you know, that we didn't have quick release mooring hooks on our deep draft dock. We have quick release mooring hooks. You know, there's just little things like that that kind of get embedded in people's psyche about the port, and we got to go out there and correct the record. And so there's a lot of that sort of behind the scenes work. So, and it is what it is. I call it north to the future, and that's staying on our dock looking north, you know, and it truly is north to the future. As I showed you guys in that couple of those maps, I mean, there's opportunities galore in the West Susitna, and it's not going away. I mean, we are in the path of growth and development. Growth and development isn't moving away from us, it's moving towards us. With the increased tariffs going on over on the Anchorage side, fuel companies are taking a look at us. They're very interested in getting some fuel stored on our side. If the bridges go out for whatever reason, if there's an earthquake, and you can't drive back and forth to Anchorage, we're effectively cut off. I don't want it to sound catastrophic, but it is something we gotta weigh, especially as our population grows out here. So knowing what I know now, I'm very thankful that the Mat-Su Borough has a port. Because if we didn't have a port, we'd be at the whim of Anchorage, quite frankly. And we have an opportunity to kind of chart our own path moving forward, which is exciting.
And just say that the barge ramp, it's really exciting too, because I do know several people who, commercial fishermen, the ones that go earlier in the season and it's back and forth travel, whether it's home or Seward or whatever they store, and its storage is always is difficult. And I think this will give opportunity and more people here be able to work on them. I think that will be immediate effect that as soon as we can build that. But I think it would be good to outreach, do a very good outreach as soon as it's completed, so we can really inform the public so that this option is now available and create as much opportunity to start utilizing right away. So would be my desire.
Thank you.
Further questions from the assembly? Oh, yes, Deputy Mayor.
Dave, I wanted to thank you and your team for all the hard work you guys are doing. Thank you very much. The future of the Mat-Su, the Point Mac is going to be a shining star in that future. An outfit that you guys probably should talk to is maybe the longshoremen's, because my father-in-law is a longshoreman, works out of Anchorage, and he claims that Point Mac has got, the currents are too, how do you put it, basically too dramatic or something to that point. So maybe talking with a business agent there at the longshoremen's, maybe we can get that straightened out.
On that point, through the mayor,
Go ahead.
Mr. Bernier, we just had there's a bunch of little things going on, so I can't touch on everything, but we just had a study done where we ran transects, and it's called an ADCP study. I don't remember exactly what that stands for, but we measured our current out in front of our deep draft dock. It's the first time it's been done. Historically, we're having to rely on information from NOAA or Army Corps of Engineers or Anchorage, but we captured that data on our own. So we know exactly what our currents are now in front of the dock, which is exciting. We're going to take that data and we're going to be working with Safeguard Marine, who wrote the 2014 navigational assessment for the borough. And we're going to revise that report utilizing our new data. We're going to take that data and we're going to build a simulator. And that simulator is going to be used down at AvTech in Seward so that the pilots and any other captains that want to operate out in front of Port McKenzie or at Port McKenzie can actually run a simulation. So I'm not going to deny that we don't have challenging conditions. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we got the second largest tidal fluctuations in North America, 30 feet on average, twice a day, going up and down. The currents out in front of in the channel of the dock run about 7 knots on the ebb, the outgoing tide. So you got all that water coming out of the Matanuska, Knik River watershed, Knik Arm, flowing past us, right? So now that's the extreme. That's the extreme, but it's still significant. But hey, boats are designed to break water. So 6 to 7 knots is what I tell folks. The incoming tide, the flood, out in front of in the channel out in front of the dock, averages about 4 knots. So it's a little calmer coming in, a little bit more extreme going out. But right at the face isn't 7 knots or 4 knots. It's way reduced. So that is a concern for sure. And ice is a concern. But what I like to tell people is they're doing it 2 miles away year round. They're bringing 4 ships in a week year round in the middle of winter. And something to keep in mind, and I wish I would have thrown a picture of this in the presentation, the first ship to ever dock at Port McKenzie the Keong Majesty, a big bulk carrier for wood chips, 650 feet long, drafting at 45 feet, docked January 2005. So the first ship we ever had dock at Port McKenzie was in the middle of winter. At that time, the tugs, which Cook Inlet Tug and Barge has a tug base 2 miles away, the tugs only had about 7,000 horsepower. Today, they got 16,000 horsepower. So the capacity for the tug operators is very robust. It's only gotten better. So we're in a good spot. And so I just want to point that out.
Assemblyperson Key, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, when you said you thought you'd be crazy a few years ago to be doing what you're doing now, a former assembly member who shall remain nameless basically said we should blow it up. The Air Force should use it for target practice because at that time it was just a money pit, a drain. And you saved the day, and it's amazing the turnaround. Just misinformation like the dredging. That was huge for me because I went down to the U.S. Geological Services and they had all these maps about where all this mud was and everything. And well, of course you can't put a port there because you're going to dredge it every half hour. I don't think people, until you said that, I did not know that what you're saying is true. They've got some misinformation. That's huge stuff. So I think that's a really big deal is to go through that thing and find out all the things that people were led to believe and the reason that it didn't move very fast. And something I wanted to, just out of curiosity, that I know we got the grant for the sleeves and all that thing, and you said we had a certain number finished, and we got like 32 left to go. How many did we finish?
32.
Oh, so
There's 64 total.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're half done. The other thing, just curiosity, who do we contract that work? Do you have a staff that does that? How do you?
Go ahead, sir.
Through the mayor. That work was performed by professional contractors that specialize in marine construction. It was Western Marine Construction, quite frankly. That was the name of them. They were awesome, top notch. You know, it was interesting, that project, because we only got one bid, and it was them. And that's who we were excited to get. But I had 5 different companies come out there and look at it, and they're like, holy smokes, how are we going to work in these waters? We got to have diving, and the water's going up and down, and there's currents, and et cetera. But they came in and they made it work, and it was awesome. And that pile sleeve is one of those projects. It's like, what do pile sleeves do? Well, in this case, it's actually protecting the steel. So one of our big battles is, we call it cathodic protection. And they have cathodic protection, can be in highway bridges and pipelines, et cetera, but it's trying to slow down electrolysis or the corrosion of the metal. And so the only time that cathodic protection works is when the metal is in the water or touching the water. So think about our piles are exposed twice a day to the air. They dry out twice a day, 30 feet of them. What these sleeves do is by default protect the metal. It's basically like a steel jacket that wraps the pile. And so the steel jacket will corrode first, then it'll get into the pile. So the estimated extension of life by putting these jackets on, from the engineer's perspective, is 25 years.
Wow.
From the contractor's perspective, is 50 years. So our deep draft dock isn't going anywhere for a very long time, if ever. So,
Final thing, just so I don't take everybody's time. Nick Begich is the newbie, and he's a really active guy, and he's very young and forward-looking. Are you getting any action from him?
Through the mayor, yes. In fact, we had the honor to meet with Representative Begich between Christmas and New Year's, right before he went to D.C., and yeah, he gets it.
He's on board.
He's on board. And also we work, District 30, State House District 30 is Representative Kevin McCabe's district. And Representative McCabe is a big supporter of the port. He's a big supporter of completing the rail project. And if you haven't looked at the congressional districts, District 30 is a really large district. It goes all the way from Port McKenzie all the way up to Anderson, north of Healy. It's got a very big district. And there's a lot of railroad in there. So we're excited working with him. We appreciate his support and his staff support. So there's a lot of bright spots on the horizon, and I look forward to giving this body an update. Maybe it won't be in the afternoon. Maybe it'll be when it's dark and cold in the winter, but I look forward to giving everybody here an update on the port. And like I said, one of the reasons I wanted to get in front of you now is so I've not taken 5 or 10 minutes at a traditional assembly meeting, because there are going to be things that are going to be coming to you here in the near term. One of which will be the Lorraine pit for material. We'll have to get some approval for that. Nova Minerals is looking at a long-term lease of some sort, and or at least starting with a long-term exclusive permit so they can start doing due diligence on this piece of property. And then there's others. Some of them are a little grandiose, but hey, we are listening to all sorts of things. So yeah, there'll be some things coming your way. So I just wanted to get in front of you.
Assemblyperson Gamble, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, Dave, has the Alaska Railroad resubmitted the application, the updated application for the funding of the railroad extension?
Go ahead.
Mayor, Mr. Gamble, where we're at with, are you speaking to that Creasy grant?
Yes.
The notice of funding opportunity for 2025 has not come out yet. What we are currently looking at doing is, and we have been working with the Alaska Railroad, so and they've been great to work with. What's interesting about this grant opportunity is last year, the railroad put together a grant package, an application package, and we're unsuccessful. So Mike and I met with them, I don't know, a month and a half ago or so, and they asked us if this year, if the borough would put their name on it and submit it. So what we're looking at doing is getting a new cost estimate, because we feel like the cost estimate for completing the railroad or the Port McKenzie Rail Extension project is outdated and it seems a little high. And so we are exploring an updated cost estimate for completion. Mind you, of the 32 miles, 25 miles of embankment is constructed. Of the 6 water crossings, all the bridges are across the water. We need the remaining 7 miles of embankment run through the Point McKenzie farms, straight, flat, well drained. So we're really looking at 7 miles of embankment, an intersection, ballast rock, railroad ties, track, signals. And we just want to get an updated cost estimate. So the plan, and we'll be bringing this in front of you guys, I'm sure, at some point through an IM or some sort of action, is the borough would submit the Creasy grant application. And we've got some plan Bs. We've talked to a couple of asset management companies that are interested in the project and possibly running it as a concessionaire, where the borough would own the land, the right of way, and then they would lease it and run a rail on it, like a short line extension. So we're hoping that we can get the project federalized and then hand it off to the Alaska Railroad. But if that's not the case, then there may be some creative investment funding opportunities, public-private partnership type of scenarios where we can get the project finished. It's one of those situations where everybody understands the importance of the railroad. Everybody needs it. They see the value in it and want it finished. We want it finished. It's a management headache administratively. There's dumping, trespass, tree cutting, shooting, hunting, camping. There's all sorts of different things going on out there that is causing us headaches, and some of the property owners aren't too happy, as you could imagine. And so the sooner we can get that project finished, the better. So that's sort of where we're at the moment. We'll know more, I think, once we get the Federal Rail Administration grant notice of funding opportunity on our desk and take a look at it.
Well, I think Thank you for the presentation, sir. I think you've answered all of the questions. So on the agenda, we will move on to the parting comments. Assemblyperson Fanoff, do you have any parting comments? No? Assemblyperson Gamble? No. Assemblyperson Sumner? No. Okay. Assemblyperson Nowers online, do you have parting comments?
No comments. Thanks for the presentation.
And I do think Assemblyperson Hale has checked in. Some Deputy Mayor, parting comments?
Pray for Texas.
Mr. Manager, parting comments?
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, nice job, Dave. That is a small but mighty team. If you had asked Dave to have the full-time team stand up a year ago, he would have been a one-man band. You supported the addition of those two positions, and I just want to say thank you to the Assembly. You probably won't get any credit for this stuff. I mean, but your consistency and support, and Ms. McKee alluded to it, like what the sentiment was 4 years ago, like how people felt about the port. That sentiment is changing. And so you've been consistent, supported the resources, made sure the budgets are there, and given clear direction about what you want to have done. So I just want to take a moment and say thank you. We can't do that if you're not consistent in what you tell us to do, right? That's not been shifting, and you've been a steady hand in terms of what you want those priorities to look like, and that you've been clear supporters for Port McKenzie. So I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you, because you probably won't get it anywhere else, unfortunately. But I think someday, and who knows what that'll look like exactly, it's going to be a good thing for the Mat-Su. So thank you.
Madam Clerk, do you have parting comments? No. Okay, Mr. Attorney, do you have parting comments? Good presentation, thank you. And she apparently left, I guess. So I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 5:11.
You will now be disconnected.